Well, welcome back, everyone. Today I'm honored to be joined by Mr. David Shenk. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Jackson.
Yeah, my pleasure. Talk to me about the Flynn effect. What is it?
Okay. Um, the Flynn effect is named after James Flynn, who was a researcher in intelligence in about, let's see, I guess 40 or 50 years ago. I'm actually not sure if he's still around, but he's a New Zealand researcher. And he was noticing something when he started looking hard at the history of IQ scores. And what he was noticing was that IQ scores have been creeping up every couple of years through as long as they've been as long as they've been giving people these tests
Right.
somewhat consistently. Um, so it got to the point where let me get the numbers right here. Um, so it got to the point where comparing scores in 1981 to 19 to the scores in 1990, um, if you kind of if you kind of mesh them and correctly, if you put them all on the same level, that going backward, everyone the average score of an average score of 100 in the late 20th century would have using that curve, the average score in 1900 would have been about 60, meaning by our standards, everyone 100 years before, 80 years before, would have been um, very cognitively challenged, to
Yeah,
put it crudely.
to put it nicely.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll keep all the we'll try to keep all the slang terms out of this. So um, this didn't make sense the way people were talking about IQ scores, because IQ is supposed to be, or was thought to be, this scientific measure of your innate, genetic driven natural intelligence.
Right.
And how is it that in a couple of generations, every person around the world was dramatically smarter, uh, genetically and innately smarter than just a couple of generations before? It didn't make sense. And so then uh, Flynn started looking closely at this, and what he discovered basically blew up our entire understanding, or their understanding at the time, of IQ as being this innate gene driven thing. Because what he discovered was our intelligence is so driven by our environment, by our culture, and that something had happened uh, to contemporary cultures, that all sorts of things that had happened, such that ideas had come into our cultures over those three generations, which made us more intelligent.
Hmm.
Uh, and basically made everyone more intelligent. Now, there was still an array of different, intelligences, but basically, once you understand that there are things in culture and in your own family and in your own, microculture, where um, those influences can dramatically affect the intelligence scores you're getting, you have to have a whole entirely new understanding of what intelligence is.
Right.
And that new understanding has to include an enormous influence of environmental influences. And it challenges the whole notion of being born with a certain amount of intelligence that you're just destined to have. Now, frightfully and awkwardly and destructively, even in 2025, I'm afraid that the part of the popular understanding, the way people talking about IQ scores is, oh, what IQ score do you have? What intelligence were you naturally born with? You're a 140? Oh, wow, I'm only a 120, 122. You're just naturally smarter than I am.
Right.
That that's wrong. We're living with now 125-year-old vestige, incorrect vestige of what intelligence is. And to cut to the chase, intelligence is a collection of skills that you develop or you do not develop. I'm not saying that genes don't play a part of it, but the more closely you look at it, the genetic influences are only influences insofar as those genes are actually also themselves turned on and off by your environment, by your culture, by your upbringing. So there are all sorts of things that came after James Flynn's discovery to kind of reinforce this and build a whole world of knowledge about what intelligence actually is. But in a way, it kind of started with James Flynn and this effect that he discovered of that just didn't make sense. It didn't fit with our then understanding of quote unquote innate intelligence.
Yeah, and you talked about this is a worldwide phenomenon. Does it change across culture? Obviously, the United States has a very different culture from, let's say, Thailand. Are we seeing the same kind of rises in intelligence there as well as here, or is it kind of more centralized to a certain culture or people?
So I actually can't answer that question specifically because I don't know what all the countries that Flynn looked at and subsequent research looked at. But the general understanding is that, and my general understanding is that um, it's a phenomenon of contemporary civilization, and the more your civilization is plugged into uh, modern ideas and information gathering systems and so forth, the more you're going to be seeing this differential between the kind of old scores and the new scores. In other words, we can influence we in other words, our intelligence is a response to the environmental demands we put on ourselves, whether that environment
Right.
is in your own family, in on your own block, in your own school district, in your own city, in your own country, in your own hemisphere. um, that discovery is sound, and that discovery and that observation is universal.
You were talking about modernity and what about our culture kind of allows this increase in intelligence because since culture is related to um, our current IQ scores and the sophistication that we have. Can you kind of expound more on that?
Well, I mean, looking around at at our culture, we're um, there's a lot we still have yet to learn, but we're just um, we live in a in a complex, very complex array of concepts and ideas. I mean, everyone does.
Right.
We think abstractly in all kinds of ways. You don't even have to be that educated to understand, formally educated to understand that a lot of the world depends on science and logic and uh, facts and fact checking, and
Right.
we understand we have an understanding of even a relatively uneducated person understands that we live in a world with all these countries. We have a kind of a sense of the world out there and all the different cultures that are out there. Just a lot of this was just not available to a person in the year 1900 or the year 1800 or the year
Right.
1700. There is a greater there's just a huge there's been a huge increase of concepts and layers of abstract thinking, that we're all that's available to us and washes over us
Right.
in our culture, just in you turn on the radio and just the way people talk about anything. So, and obviously people live on different it's not everyone is at the same level of discussing uh, the intricacies of concepts, but and there's a lot of specialized things. In fact, the our not the store of our knowledge is and in our world is so vast that we've gone from a world where 100 years ago, if you were highly educated, you could literally know almost everything that was known by human beings. You could like read set of that set of books
Right.
and know what had been gathered over time. Now, as everyone knows, you know, we're in a specialized world where if you want to be an expert on something, you have to get very, very narrow because every field has acquired so much knowledge, even to keep up with your very narrow field. So what that means to non-experts, meaning all of us, before we get to become experts at something, if we're lucky enough, is that we just live in a layered and very complex world, and we're aware vaguely of that.
Yeah. And how do you reconcile that with things like, obviously, Da Vinci, Michelangelo? There were geniuses back before we kind of had the modern culture that we have. Um, but now we have, is it simply that we've gone from there were fewer, more, uh, more elusive, more profound geniuses then, and now more people are geniuses now? Or is it that, is there something else that kind of influence the ability for those people to be in a time where the culture was much less sophisticated?
Well, um, first of all, there's not a clear demarcation between a genius and a non-genius, and someone isn't. Let me just take on that term for 1 second.
Yeah.
There isn't there's the way we think about someone being a genius. They are just this kind of magical person who's not like the rest of us, and they operate on a different level. Um, we to go back to my first point. Um, there's a new way of understanding intelligence. It's not something that we have a certain amount of that we're lucky or unlucky enough to be programmed uh, by our genes. I was, you know, I'm whatever abilities I have cognitively is not some sort of number that I was given by my genes when I
Right.
was born.
Right.
It's the collective uh, accumulation of knowledge and skills that I have that I've built up to the moment that we're talking right now. I'm 58 years old. I know a lot more than I did when I was 48. I probably also have forgotten a lot more. I've gained some skills. I've also lost some skills in the last 10 or 20 years. Uh, whatever, there's a variety of ways to measure that, but no matter how you slice it, no matter how you try to measure it, you're going to be measuring. If you try to measure my intelligence, you're going to be measuring my collection of skills. Is there something that I'm doing that is so impressive to people that that they want to call me a genius in a certain domain, or they want to call me a genius overall? That's that's a term that people can use or not use, but it all comes down to what knowledge I have and what skills I have.
Yeah. Is
So
No, go ahead.
to try to answer your question about Da Vinci, he lived a long, long time ago. He was an extraordinary man. He did amazing things. He was able to accumulate a very significant percentage of the world's collected knowledge and ideas that existed at that time. And I'm sure he blew away a lot of people with that, and more power to him. Calling him a genius or not a genius now, and trying to compare him to another person that we want to call a genius, Bill Gates or someone of today. It's apples and oranges. It's a different person. It's a different time. It's a different set of a collection of knowledge. It's also a different collection of skills. Um, Am I answering your question?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense.
Okay.
It sounds like, and I might be understanding this wrong, that because partly they're in different cultures, so we kind of measure things differently, but also because Da Vinci may have been able to reap all of the knowledge that was kind of publicly available to the world back then, and he didn't have to specialize because the world was much more generalized back then he was kind of able to pull from all of that towards becoming very good at his craft in a way that a lot of other people weren't, partly because they didn't have access to that. Education was probably was much less common back then, but because he was able to kind of pull all that information and then put it all together into his craft, some people would look at him as a genius. Is that am I
Yeah,
understanding that
sure.
correct?
That's a very fair way of putting it. Absolutely.
There's from my understanding there's two kinds of intelligence. There's crystallized intelligence, which is kind of like the knowledge, skills, and experience you've gained from actually doing things or learning things in school. And then there's this fluid intelligence that's kind of the ability to reason abstractly. As far as the Flynn effect goes, when you're studying it, does it affect both of those areas differently, and does it affect one of them more profoundly than the other?
I can't answer that question. That's a great question. You're going to have to ask someone else about that because the truth is I'm not an expert in all the different types of intelligence. I'm aware that there's those two different types. There's also a way of looking at intelligence where you could say that there are a dozen different types of intelligence, and there's people are strong or weak in languages, and they're strong or weak in mathematics, and things like that. But I actually can't answer the question that you asked me, and that means that I'm not
No
intelligent
worries.
enough, and I haven't accumulated that set of knowledge or skills.
No worries at all. You talked about measuring intelligence. Currently, the way we measure intelligence does not seem to be the right way of doing it. It seems outdated, considering the information we have now. What's a right way of measuring intelligence, IQ? Should that even be something we're kind of aiming towards?
Yeah, I'm not even saying that the IQ tests. I'm also really not an expert in IQ tests, but I'm not saying that IQ tests are not a reasonable way to measure intelligence or to measure. All I'm saying is that when there are lots of different ways to measure what we call intelligence, but it's really important that whatever the way we're using, that we're aware that we're taking a snapshot of a person in a moment. If they're 10 years old, if they're 20, if they're 30, if they're like me, if they're 58, and we're measuring the set of skills that person has, cognitive skills that person has in that moment. We're not measuring something that person was born with, and that those set of skills is just kind of built into him or her. It's always going to be fluid. It's always going to be changing. It's always going to be the more someone pushes themselves, the more the environment around that person is demanding that person create new skills. That's all fluid. The most important thing to know about the human brain is that it is designed by evolution to adapt to the environment.
Right.
So and when I say environment, again, we just to repeat myself, the environment could be, the room I'm in, it can be the town I'm in, it could be the family I'm in, it could be, there are all sorts of different sizes and domains of environment, uh, but with all of them, there are demands that all those environments are putting on me, and that I'm putting on myself because of those environments. And my brain is going to respond to that. It's going to it might when I grow up in Cincinnati, Ohio, which I did, that environment is demanding that I learn the English language instead of the French language because that's what people are speaking. And so that's the set of skills I learn in language. If I happen to have a French speaking parent and an English speaking parent and they speak a lot of French at home, that environment is demanding that I'm learning those two languages at the same time. And we know that that's very common for kids who are in an environment like that to respond to that, and the brain delivers. It's not impossible for a child or even adult to learn multiple languages, depending on
Right.
what what they're demanding of themselves and what is necessary for them to succeed in their or even more than succeed in their environment. It's the brain. The brain is the intelligent thing. The brain's adaptability is the kind of the closest thing to what I would call genius
Right.
in this discussion. And so the question is, what sort of demands are we going to put on our individual brains and our collective brains? And then we're going to see, because whatever demands we put on them, they are going to perform for us. It's quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Does that mean then that if we were to kind of, as a culture, go to a more simplistic way of life, that we would kind of see a backwards progression in this Flynn effect, that people would become less adept at creative problem solving and abstract reasoning simply because it was less necessary?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not. I mean, if you wanted to conduct a horrible experiment and have your child grow up in a box with no, with no
Not great.
input, or take them to an island where they weren't exposed to all these extraordinary influences that culture exposes us to, and you were instead, uh, demanding very, very little of that child, uh, and therefore expecting the brain to develop a rather minimal set of skills. That's what you'd get.
Right.
And if we were to do that culturally on a bigger level, if we were to have some sort of apocalypse where we do not, I mean, we do not, as we do today, like stand on the shoulders of scores of generations of people who have done the hard work in math and in science and in all these other domains to build the really incredibly complex and beautiful world that we've built for ourselves. um, then if we were to somehow blow all that up, uh, knocking on wood here, that doesn't happen, and go back to a much more primitive time where we're not even aware of those concepts, our brains would be much less impressive, and
Right.
we start all over and start hopefully discovering those concepts again. And I mean, there's the old joke where people, you see this in sitcoms and in movies, where people are like, so if there were an apocalypse, who's gonna who's gonna know how to build the cell phone?
Right.
Where's that's gonna come from? It's
Right.
not gonna come from one dude, because the cell phone exists because a lot of different people over a lot of years developed all these concepts, which then in turn allowed us to develop all these little miniature tools, which connected with satellites and all these other things, which were built by other people. And we're you and I are living, on the 100th story of all those ideas, right?
Right.
And that doesn't mean that you and I know all that intricate knowledge,
Absolutely not.
but it does mean that we are exposed to it, and it does mean that there's a certain level of sophistication that allows that we get to enjoy and hopefully appreciate,
Yeah. Is
and
there
hopefully not take for granted.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Is there kind of a threshold for how much is too much, as far as like there are there has to be a point, right, where we have too much going on. There's too much complexity for our brain to kind of handle and take in, and then it kind of I would be curious, does it at that point kind of start to go backward as we kind of block out things to simplify our life so we can kind of move in a day-to-day world?
Well, that's a great question. I actually wrote a book. My One of my earlier books was called Data Smog, about information overload, as they say,
Yeah.
information proliferation, and certainly one of the things that's happened over the last century is we've gone from a place where relatively little information is available, and our struggle was to just get a hold of useful information. Now mostly our struggle is to weed through just the incredible tidal wave of information that we're all exposed to on a moment to moment basis. um, is there such thing as too much in any given moment? Sure, it can be overwhelming, and our job in today's world is to use devices and strategies and even philosophy, kind of personal philosophies on how to be disciplined about what information we're looking for and making sure that it's reliable and plugging it into what we already know. That's kind of that kind of describes the job of all of us these days. Is
Yeah.
it's just going out there and throwing a lot of, I mean, you could literally open up a bunch of screens and just have the information about every subject just kind of screaming at you. You could turn on play and have all these audiobooks, but obviously that's not a way to learn. That's you want to focus in at any given moment. You want to be contemplative. You want to take breaks from it. I think we all know intuitively what the difference between an overwhelmed, overstressed life where you're not at your best, you're not at your learning best, versus um, getting the right amount of rest and having some exercise in your life, and eating enough but not eating too much, and eating healthy, and spending time enjoying yourself, and then also spending plenty of time getting to work and trying to build the knowledge and the skills that you hopefully will put to good use in your life. Um, so yeah, there's in any given moment there is such a thing as too much, and such a thing as managing the information that's available to us really poorly.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know what's going on now. Everyone's walking around just looking at this phone, and what are they missing? There's all this stuff going out in the world. It's always funny to me when you go to live events these days. You're at an amazing rock concert. Rock concert. You're at an amazing musical performance, and you paid maybe hundreds of dollars for the ticket, and you're actually
Just
videotaping.
staring at your phone the whole
You're looking
time.
at your own phone, and by the way, there's so the other 20,000 people, and you're going to just have all these copies that no one needs, and
Right.
most people won't ever look at, as opposed to just taking in the primary source of what's happening to you. So yeah, I mean, those are things that we all have to balance, and if we do a poor job of that, if we get carried away by the thrill of the stimulation and the information coming in, and we're not being disciplined about deciding what's accurate and what's important and how to fit the new information in with old information, then our own skills are gonna suffer for that.
Right. How have we kind of seen the human brain progress as it learns how to deal with this excess amount of information? What have kind of been the changes that you've seen as far as this ability to cope with everything happening around us all the time?
Um, well, that's a big one. I mean, a lot of that is just kind of obvious to anyone who's living in today's world. Um, I grew up um, where we behave differently, and we have to adapt to uh, and we experience information and communication very very differently than we used to. I grew up uh, with a phone being something that's attached, that's hanging on the wall and in your house, and if you're lucky, you have one phone, maybe two numbers, if there's a lot of people in your family, uh, and uh, and when someone called, by the way, they weren't able to leave a message if you weren't there. It's just the phone rang and rang, and you would actually not even know that someone called. So then they'd have to keep calling back. In college, the way I communicated with people was that since we didn't have any kind of machines, and we didn't have any sort of personal, phones or anything like that, we would have a bulletin board in front of our dorm room, where if you went to visit someone and you wanted to just find them to be, to socialize or work with them, just to get together. If they weren't there in their dorm room, you'd write a note saying, hey, Tom, I was here. I'm going to be down at the, on the third floor of the library. Come by. Um, and that was one set of behaviors that I had to learn. It wasn't too tricky, obviously, but I was also limited by that. I might spend half a day trying to find a person to socialize with or learn from. Now I text someone and and the person I'm texting is probably getting a text from 20 other people, so they're going to have to decide, how to spend that time and who to answer and which person to say yes to and all that. So we're all adapting. We're using the tools that we have. There's a lot of great things about these tools. We're also there's also the demand for our attention is greater than ever, and we need to develop all sorts of strategies to not let that overwhelming us. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question now. I've been on a roll here, but
No, you're good. Yeah, no,
okay.
that, yeah, no, it's, I'm curious, as far as like the time frame for adaptability of the human brain, obviously we've gone from basically technology was kind of this thing you could like hop into and then hop out of and just be done with it, to technology, the internet, all of it is all around us all the time, within the space of like 20, 30 years. How
Yeah.
fast does it kind of take the human brain to kind of adapt to that world? Are we still seeing people struggling to adapt to it, or are we relatively quick to kind of understand the situation we're in and move accordingly?
Well, I'm 58. I've said that a couple times. How old are you?
I am 20.
Okay. So, you were born in
Oh 4.
2000,
Oh
04.
4,
Okay.
yeah.
So the internet was already a vibrant thing literally
Right.
on the moment you were born.
Yeah.
In '04, I was 38 years old. Um, so I had grown up, I had spent my entire childhood without anything like the internet. Even the
Right.
concept of the internet didn't, we weren't even dreaming of the internet. Um, so I've had to adapt to that. I think I did a pretty good job. I was a relatively young man when the internet kind of came into its own. Of course, the internet itself, we're using the same term, but the internet changes really substantially every couple of years. People are using it in different ways. In the first many years of the internet, social media existed, but it didn't really exist the way it,
It
it
does now.
exists
Yeah.
now. We didn't use that term, but also it hadn't really become a phenomenon. And though, even when we were aware of in a nascent way, how the internet was changing our society, um, we had no sense of what was about to come with all the changes that have come with social media. Just that one little aspect of these technologies. What will social media be like in 5 or 10 years? Will it have changed again? Will people have found something else? Will we have different technologies that we're using that make the way we use social media now obsolete, easier, harder? So the technologies are changing. There's a lot of change even from year to year. That's one point. The second point is that we adapt differently depending on where we are in our lives. I'm 58 years old. I like to think I've got some energy. I like to think that I'm still adapting, but the truth is, I'm not. There's no way I'm keeping up with the changes nearly as fast as you are, because you're in a part of your life where you're just
Right.
soaking that stuff up,
Everything's
and
moving fast,
you're
including
probably
this. Yeah.
you're probably enjoying the change a lot more. Whereas I've gotten to many points in my life where I'm like, this is working for me. I've got my friends. I've got my way of working. I've got my way of enjoying the world. I've got my way of experiencing the world and communicating with people. I don't need a new way.
Right.
It's
Why don't
not
we just stop here?
exactly. It's not going to make me happier. Now, then my son might teach me something that on one of the new tools that once I learn it, I actually find exciting, just like I used to teach my parents and they used to teach their parents. But at a certain point, as we get older, we are more set in our ways, and it's not necessarily that we don't have the brain power to do that. Although our brains are less plastic than my brain is certainly less adaptable than yours. That's just the way. I'm on the wane here, and you're on the incline still. So your brain is firing, much better than mine. So there is something that kind of correlates to age. There's also something that correlates to just kind of where you think of yourself in your life, whether you kind of have what you want or you are still like kind of growing into the world. Again, me versus you. We're kind of on different sides of that. It's great that we're having this conversation and we could still speak to each other, but that's also just kind of a reality.
Yeah.
Uh, so again, I hope I'm answering your question, but to go back to the core idea, um, all of this comes back to just the absolutely phenomenal adaptability of this machine called the human brain, which was designed over millions or billions of years, depending on how you look at it, to 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 create this machine that exists now. And the machine is an adaptability machine. That's what it does.
Right.
It doesn't have information in it. It has this absolutely extraordinary way through our various senses that are plugged into it to take in information and adapt to that information and build skills in order to live in the world that we live in. And the reason human beings have thrived for relatively long time now and are able to go through the types of changes that you and I are talking about, even during the course of your own lifetime, is that we have this adaptability machine that is built to change according to the demands that we put on it.
Right.
If that weren't so, we would stop making new stuff, right?
Right.
We would just be like, no, this is just hurting now. It's not improving anything. It's not making us richer. It's not making us happier. It's not making us more efficient in any way. We've come to a stopping point, and we haven't found that point in terms of the limits of our biology. We need to treat our brains really carefully. We need to understand them, as best we can, and we need to kind of moderate the adapting that we do so that we have fulfilling lives and not overwhelmed lives. But we haven't found the limits of these machines that are in our head
Yeah.
yet. It's really extraordinary, and just look at the things that the extraordinary people among us do, physically, intellectually, emotionally, artistically. The people who we call geniuses now, who are just kind of excelling beyond what the norm is in any culture. Those are people who are pushing this machine to at least to their own biological limits, or at least past what we're pushing it to.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's a cost to that too, because their lives aren't necessarily so great, aside from the extraordinary things they're able to do. But they've done these extraordinary things, and we get to enjoy them.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as kind of the human brain's ability to adapt, how much of that is kind of limited if you don't have a solid groundwork to stand on? In other words, so from a personal point of view, I have like my things in life that kind of stay the same. I've got my family. I'm a Christian, so I got my church. I've got my community. I've got the things that I do daily, and then on top of that, there's the like the social media, the internet, the wild, crazy things that are going all over the place. How much of the human brain's ability to take all of that and understand and comprehend it is based on or necessary in the fact that we have something to stand on that's kind of stays normal?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would use the word balanced in response to what you put in, not normal, because normal is a term that can mean a lot of
All
different
over the
things.
place, yeah.
But the life that you just described for yourself, I have my own version of that. I'm Jewish. I'm actually not like religious Jewish. I'm more culturally Jewish, but
Yep.
I have my own spirituality in my life, which helps me ground uh, my own life and accept some of the awful things that happen to all of us and that are
Yeah.
happening around the world that help me have my downtime. I have my social life, both physical with people and also using these all these great technologies to I keep in touch with people. I just an hour ago was communicating with four college friends. They're one's in California, two are in Israel. I'm here talking to you from Massachusetts.
Right.
We're all getting on planes, and we're going to be meeting in Paris.
Right.
So, but and we're getting together because we like to be together, but we still actually have relationships that are active over these technologies when we're not together. So, you know, extraordinary things that we're all able to enjoy, which when I was a kid, my dad wouldn't be able to stay friends with those people. He might be friends with those people, but he'd have to
Couldn't stay in touch.
he couldn't stay in touch. He'd have to write a letter and then they'd have to write a letter back. And that wasn't not meaningful to him and to his friends who were abroad, but probably those relationships were a lot more limited in terms of what they could communicate and share in real time. But to get back to your question about balance, I think the question is the answer. We need balance. We need to have respect for our own limitations. We need to we need to um, we need to decide what our priorities are in all the different domains of our lives and be be we constantly need to take a step back and judge whether or not we're getting carried away. Now that we have all these, we have the ability to kind of easily spend. I could technically spend 18 hours a day just staring at my phone, and what would I be losing out if I were doing that? I
Quite
what
a bit. Yeah.
Right. I wouldn't have spent the time at my cafe that I just was at, talking to a friend in person. I wouldn't have been able to get, all these. After you and I talk, I'm going to be speaking to a friend in a way, kind of an old fashioned telephone call. And if I were just looking at a string of web pages or TikToks or whatever on my phone, which I could fill up my time with, I would be losing out on that all the different things I can fill my day with, and I wouldn't be kind of having that balance that I think you were talking about in your own life, which I think is really important. People can make a different decision. They can decide they want to spend the 18 hours a
Right.
day, their entire waking day on one thing. They can practice pole vaulting for 18 hours a day because that's all they want to do and they want to be the best in the world and they want to put all these other things, you know, t- to the side. It's there's a certain amount of personal choice that we all have to respect, but I myself, and it sounds like you, we prefer balance. We prefer
Yeah.
to have a range of things that all kind of work to keep all the different things in balance and to hopefully let us sleep through the night and dream well.
Yes. As far as symptoms that you see in yourself that maybe things are out of balance, what are things you're looking for, observing that would kind of indicate to you that things are not as they should be?
Another great question. If I'm not sleeping well, if I'm irritable, um, if I feel stressed, if I am, if I have a headache. I mean, there's all sorts of. We all know what uh, that stress can basically cause any malady these days.
Yeah.
So we want to have the way I think about it in my own life is I want to have an energetic life. I want to have adventure. I want to have fun. But I also want to balance that out with rest, with relaxation. I actually really enjoy meditation these days. I find the ability to just really decompress and uh, to to not think, to just kind of focus
Right.
on my breath for a certain period of time and just let my brain do its own thing, is really, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel, I get that the same feeling of the way you feel when you're walking out of a gym after, exercising for 30 minutes. You just kind of feel like
Yeah.
you've done your brain and your body a favor. So I try to listen to all that, and I I'm not always successful at it either, because
Yeah.
we're all facing all these choices, and we all end the day uh, at different points thinking, oh, I should
Done
have
this or done that. Yeah.
worked harder or played harder, or but then maybe the next day is going to be, maybe we're going to learn a lesson for the next day.
Yeah. Kind of shifting back to the Flynn effect, I'm
Yeah.
curious, are we able to, as far as looking across generations, or I don't even know if it's generations, it sounds like it's more of a like year to year as culture progresses thing. Do we see different changes and progressions at a different level of intensity across different areas of focus, of intellect? In other words, are we seeing that creativity is going up as we kind of see this Flynn effect continue to uh, happen, and are we seeing the ability to, I don't know, make logical connections go down? Or what's kind of the balance there?
Yeah, I can only guess at those things. I really can't answer that question. I'm not a professional. I'm not a researcher in intelligence testing, and so I couldn't even begin to give you like data on that. Um, my my guess is that I have a lot of respect for the people who do uh, all that testing. I think that they're always improving their methods. They're always trying to uh, to 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 make sure that they're not missing anything with their tests, and so they're always adjusting their tests to try to measure what's out there. And I think, and they're probably also coming up with new observations that I'm not even aware of. Um, but I think the key is um, that if we all remember, the testers themselves, and also those of us who are just being given the test and thinking about IQ and discussing it casually, if we remember that whatever we're testing is a measurement of the skills we happen to have in that moment, it doesn't mean that we certainly didn't have those skills when we were born, and some complex combination of our lives enabled us to develop those skills up to that moment, and we've got the rest of our lives ahead of us to reinforce those skills and to build other skills. And if I move to France tomorrow and I want to and I want to make a priority out of learning of another language,
Right.
and I'm in that environment. Not only am I going to be learning that language, which is obviously another skill for me, it'd be brand new because I know all of, half a dozen French words right now. But think of all the concepts in the culture in Paris that aren't swimming around, naturally in the culture of the Berkshires here in Massachusetts. It's different cultures have different ideas that are emphasized and de-emphasized, and so that's partly up to me if I have the wherewithal to go to a different culture and to put different demands on myself. That's a set of skills that I'm going to be that my brain is equipped to adapt to
Yeah.
and to build.
Right. In other words, your brain is kind of always up for the challenge. Um, just
Hopefully,
that's
it will
how we're wired.
not always,
Not
because
always, but
because
a
I'll
lot
be
of
in
the
a
time.
box. I'll be in a box at some point, and that machine will be done.
Right.
And of course, there is decay. I mean, when I'm 85, my brain is probably not going to be functioning the way it was now, and it's my brain in many ways is probably not functioning as well as it did when it was 20. But we live lives, and we experience that, and we do the best we can. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that even for someone of my advanced years, um, it's still I still have an adaptability machine that's pretty robust in here, and I still have there's a lot of things that I can learn, and hopefully I won't just kind of sit back and enjoy what I've got, but I'll continue to challenge myself just like you're challenging yourself.
Yeah. As far as the health of the brain, do we kind of see that having those necessary or needing to adapt, needing to change, needing to learn new skills, do new things in a new environment, is healthy for the brain? Kind of helps you live longer and healthier, and avoid some of the brain diseases, Alzheimer's, things like that.
Uh, for sure, for sure. In fact, Alzheimer's is actually something that I know a little bit about because, or more than a little bit about, because I wrote a book about that and I spent a lot of years in it. You, there are all sorts of things you can do to your brain that will give you a better chance of either not getting Alzheimer's or pushing it off. There actually is no known way to prevent Alzheimer's guaranteed by doing a set of things. It's not like if I learn 10 languages or sleep, a perfect amount of hours every night that I will just be guaranteed not to develop this horrendous disease
Yeah.
eventually. But we know that there are all sorts of things you can do to for a healthy brain. They range from the sorts of things that you mentioned in terms of keeping your brain vigorously responding to all sorts of demands, which is always a great thing, to eating right. We know what good nutrition is and bad nutrition, and it's not just about our hearts, it's not just about our limbs, it's also very much about our brains. Sleep, getting the right amount of sleep, getting enough exercise every day, getting that blood flowing every day. These are all things that are enormously important for just the cellular health of our brains. They keep them as elastic and as plastic and as adaptable as possible, as long as possible. I mean, that's the nice thing about what we've learned about health and medicine in the last, say, 25 years, is that the stuff we used to say about, well, do this and hopefully you won't get a heart attack, your heart will stay healthy. All the information about how to stay healthy that we used to talk about with heart health and other things, they're also true of your brain. They're true of every part of your body. So it's not like we have to learn how to be healthy in one way and then change to this different way to be healthy. We know what the recipe is. It's getting enough sleep, really important. It's making sure that you stay vigorous physically, vigorous socially, vigorous intellectually. All those things work with one another to keep us as healthy as we're as our potential will allow us to be.
Yeah. You talked about vigorous socially. Can you kind of expound how would that help with avoiding Alzheimer's?
Well, you want to have I mean, first of all, I'm not saying, again, I have to go back and say that there is no known way to say if you do
To
these
save it. Yeah, yeah.
7 things you're good. There's no way you're going to get Alzheimer's, because
Right.
there are many examples of people who do all the things, as far as we can tell, perfectly right, and then they do get the Alzheimer's if they live long enough. So
Yeah.
there's no guarantee there. And it's not just about Alzheimer's, it's about all sorts of awful things that can happen to your body and brain. So
Yeah.
it's just this kind of holistic effort to stay healthy and to reap the benefits of that. But to answer your question, social health, keeping relationships alive in your life, whether they are email, text, Instagram, phone, FaceTime, Zoom, in person, all these things, interacting with other people. We're social beings. We do not do well. I love being alone. I love spending several hours a day,
It's very nice. Yeah.
working on my art, on my music, on my writing. I That's important to me. I think that's a great thing to be. But I also am aware that I need to spend time with people. I need to cultivate the relationships. I need to form new relationships. It's a part of staying healthy emotionally. It's a part actually of staying healthy physically, just connecting with other people, or even connecting with animals, connecting with other living beings. It's just really important. It's a part of the health of being alive, and and it's all integrated. It's all connected. So you can't just like take a certain number of vitamins and then do the right amount of exercise and then forget about the rest of the stuff. It's
Right.
all these things that we all know about and talk about all the time. They all kind of work with one another to hopefully develop the the happiest possible life for ourselves, and hopefully the longest and the most vibrant.
Yeah. What causes Alzheimer's?
Um, okay, so Alzheimer's. The best way to describe Alzheimer's in simple terms is to use the analogy of um, plaque in your arteries. We all know
Okay.
that heart attacks uh, happen generally when the arteries in your heart uh, get
Blocked up.
gummed up with
Right.
cholesterol, plaques, and literally kind of stop the blood from flowing, and then your heart isn't fed correctly, and your heart. So the same sort of thing is happening to your brain. It's a lot more complex than that, but it starts with the buildup of something called beta amyloid. Beta amyloid is a protein that is necessary to all sorts of functions in your body. You've got a certain amount of it. It helps it do all sorts of things for you in your body and in your brain, and you need a certain amount of it. We just like cholesterol. You don't want to bring your cholesterol down to zero.
Yeah.
Cholesterol is serves a function.
Right.
But what happens to us as we start to get middle aged and then past middle age is that in a lot of us, just like with cholesterol, sometimes your body can start to decay a little bit, and the mechanisms that keep you having the right amount of cholesterol can go up, and then you can have the risk of clogging up your heart, the arteries in your heart. Same thing with amyloid and the brain. I mean, it's again, it's much more complicated, but that's the analogy is that sometime around middle age, some of us start to have a certain amount of amyloid. We start to accumulate too much of that amyloid. And over many, many years' time, that over accumulation of beta amyloid sparks a series of other events in our brains, which ends up effectively burning our brains down to the ground over many years' time.
Right.
One of the interesting things to know about that is that the accumulation of amyloid can happen over 10, 20, 30 years before you have any symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. So
Wow.
it's quite a silent and invisible disease
Yeah.
for a long, long time in your middle or early later years. Um, and the real problem is that by the time you see the symptoms of Alzheimer's, you've had the disease for a while. And as long as we study this disease, it's always probably going to be impossible to successfully fight the disease after the symptoms are really taking place. If you think about a forest fire and how easy it is to stop the forest fire when it's one little twig that caught on fire, and how difficult it is to stop a fire when it's
Right.
100,000 acres, as we've
Yeah.
just seen, in
In
California.
California. Yeah.
So that's the analogy for Alzheimer's, is that the effort now in the research in Alzheimer's is to locate that moment in your life where you go from having just the right amount of beta amyloid and you start to accumulate too much, and then to have a drug which will then modulate that amount of beta amyloid, not bring it down to zero because then you'd be dead for other reasons,
Yeah.
but make sure that it doesn't go too high. Just like now we have statins that deal with cholesterol getting
Cholesterol.
too
Yeah. Yeah.
high, and we've changed the whole nature of who gets heart attacks because of that class of drugs.
Yeah. What causes that the beta amyloid to start building up and producing too much of itself?
Um, I can't give you a great technical answer to that, but it has to do with our bodies not firing. It has to do with uh, the human body being in prime condition and in a growing phase into your 20s and 30s, and then at a certain point be on the decline. And just on a cellular level, there's all sorts of things that go wrong. The thing that helps us, that causes us to build up too much cholesterol, there's just all sorts of cellular efficiencies that become less efficient, and so we have this toxic buildup of things that in our early years are almost always not toxic.
Right.
They're at the correct levels, but unfortunately, in some of us, the amyloid does start to become at a toxic level, and the exact process that causes that, I couldn't even describe it to you. If I could, then I'd be in a different line of work. But
Yeah.
I'll plug you into some Alzheimer's researchers, and they could get into more detail if you want.
That sounds fantastic. As far as people who are looking to take full advantage of the kind of ability of our brain to adapt and increase intelligence culturally, this Flynn effect. What are some ways to kind of increase your own intelligence as kind of we live in this crazy culture?
Well, that's an easy one. I mean, you don't. All you need to do to be an intelligent person is be a curious person, and it doesn't really matter what you're curious about, as long as you develop a curiosity. If you're going through life feeling like you already know what you need to know, and you don't have any questions about anything,
You're
you're not going
wrong.
to be you are wrong. I mean, that's a lifestyle.
Yes.
People can have that attitude.
Yeah.
They People have the freedom and the moral right to live a life like that. But you need to know that you're not making yourself smarter. You're not building up your brain. If you're not challenging your brain with trying to get to have questions about the things that hopefully you start with passions and curiosities, and those things kind of feed one another. Whether or not I want to run faster, or I want to learn more about the weather, or I want to learn about how to train my dog better, or I want to learn about why certain trees on my property are dying and certain others are living. Whatever it is that I want to learn more about, whether or not that helps my actual physical life, whether or not it's going to make me money, whatever it is, if I've got a curiosity about it and I can develop a passion to learn and ask questions, um, and go find answers, whether it's from talking to people or reading books or researching on the internet or coming up doing my own research, firsthand research on things, because maybe I've got questions that no one has ever asked or answered before, if I'm getting specific enough.
Yeah.
All those things are how you get smarter, because all those questions and seeking all those answers and trying to incorporate them into what I already know, that's what creates intelligence. And hopefully above intelligence, you have wisdom, and you're taking advantage of this machine in here that is, again, built to adapt.
Yeah. And of these incredible times where access to information is so readily available. It's
Absolutely.
amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so thrilling. There are a lot of challenges about being alive these days, but the extraordinary, I even take it for granted sometimes, but again, I've lived on both sides of this. I
Yeah.
remember, when I wanted to research a topic in high school or college, I had to go to the library. I had to find out what books were available. Some of those books were there. Some of those books I had to, would have to send from other libraries. And that's it. That's the
Right.
knowledge I was able to get my hands on. Now I've got a question about something. It's not that everything on the internet is reliable, but I start with an internet search. I can find out what's out there. There's a lot of stuff that's just sitting there for free, available to me. I can get access to it right away. I can learn about who's available. I can email, or text, I guess usually email, actual experts on subjects, no
Yeah.
matter where they are in the world. hopefully they're going to answer me. Some of those people are, very sought after and they're hard to get
Yeah.
their attention, but they're out there, they're available. They all have, email addresses. Instead of writing a letter and waiting weeks and weeks, it's, sometimes you do get answers right away. It is absolutely extraordinary if you have a question about something, how easy it is to kind of dive into the beginning of answers for that something. It, it's but it's fantastic. It's just
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic for any person who's curious.
Yeah.
The internet is just a marvel, and I'll always be pinching myself that we're on this side of the world of that.
Yeah. And as far as for parents, it sounds like that this whole thing kind of hinges on this childlike curiosity to kind of figure out how the world works. Um, how do you make sure that you don't lose that your kids don't lose that as they grow up and kind of eventually do become a little more specialized as you have to be in a field?
Well, I'm a parent. My kids are in their 20s now, so there's probably very little that I'm teaching them anymore. But I came to the conclusion early on that, aside from, making sure they're going to good schools and they've got good teachers and all that, the most important thing about being a parent is to show them, is to model for them the life that you think is going to be great for them. So I would just try to expose them as much as possible to the things in my own life that I was proud of, uh, namely my curiosity about things. I would try to show them how exciting it is to, if I was excited about a food, pizza is a big thing in our family, eating it, but also learning about how it's made and how to make it ourselves.
Yeah.
And so there's the curiosity of how to do that. What tools do you need? What are the best recipes? And then there's really the crux of all this, and we haven't talked about this yet, but the most important thing for me about being a parent and for being just my own person is to have a relationship with failure. To get good at anything, you're trying, you're failing, you're not taking that failure as a sign that you can never do that thing. You're taking that failure as a sign that you can't yet do that thing, and you're trying to
Yeah.
figure out, all right, what is that? This particular, I just made a really lousy pizza. It tastes terrible. It's too crispy, or it's too soft, or it's not cooked. Whatever it is, what is it about that? Can I figure it out myself, and then I'll try it again? Do I need to call my brother who makes better pizzas than me and ask him and say, I just did this thing and here's how it came out, and see if he's got some advice? But experiencing that failure, which I have done in every domain of my life, thousands or millions of times. I show my kids that I am failing at everything I do, including the professional things, and that my response to that failure is to keep at it, to persevere,
Yeah.
to learn from that failure. And it's okay to quit if I don't want to keep doing it. But if I love something enough, if I want to become better at something, failing is just an invitation to figure out why you failed, and to push through that. If you're a basketball player and you're trying to make that 3-point shot, you you just keep doing it and doing it. And when you can't do it right, you make an adjustment and you see if that makes it better. And that's an analogy for all the things in our lives. So going back to your question about parenting, I would just try to model that to my kids, to show them my curiosity, to show them how exciting it is to be passionate and curious, and to show them my response to failure, that failure is not saying, oh, you suck at this, you can't do this, go,
Give
just
up
forget
now.
it,
Yeah.
stop your dream. For me, and for our family, it's really, the lesson is the opposite. If you're interested in it, you're gonna fail. It's not gonna work out, and you expect to fail, and you just keep trying and trying, and hopefully just really incrementally you see those improvements. And now I have to say, we actually make pretty good pizza here in our household, and I'm not satisfied. I want to make better.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
things I want to do better, and next time I make it, I'm gonna be trying things. And then I'm lucky enough to have some friends come over, and they are enjoying the pizza that I have, and I'm sitting there going, okay, well, this is pretty good. I'm pleasing these people, but I can do better. I can do this other thing, and I could try it, and and that's the kind of joy of being alive, is you're enjoying what you can do, but you're also not quite, you're never
You're
quite
never
fully
quite
satisfied
there.
with it. You want to keep improving.
Yeah, the fear of failure is, from what I understand, one of the greatest inhibitors of success, and kind of seeing it as a slip as opposed to just devastation is one of the wonderful things we get to do, is fail and then become better at something. As we kind of wrap up here, I always like to ask, what's your best piece of advice you would give to anyone watching?
Um, that would be it. It would be failure. It would be understanding that failure is, if you want to, if you don't want to do something anymore after you fail at it, that's your right, and it's perfectly valid. There are things that I have done not well in my life that I didn't want to become better at. I just, okay, I don't have this drive. It's not like every time I was mediocre at something that I felt I had to become better at it. But there are things that I did want to become better at, and I learned early on that those things, if I persevered, I would expect to have failure all along the way. Even as you're getting better, you're going to be pushing yourself to do a little better, and then you're going to fail at that expectation, at that desire to do better. So it's just nothing but a series of big and little failures, and the way you respond to that, if you push into it and you realize that you can always learn something from failure, and once you start to experience that joy of failing, learning the lesson, trying really hard, sticking with it, and then actually getting past that one failure, and kind of mastering that one little skill, and then you keep going to the next failure. Once you kind of experience the thrill of that cycle, and you build that as into your life as just kind of this ongoing habit, it's really exciting, and it's a fulfilling way to live. It doesn't make living any easier, but I think it makes it more fun, because you know that eventually, if you keep trying at something, you're gonna, if you care to, you're gonna get better at it.
Yeah. Where can people find you and this work and all of that online?
Uh, Thank you for asking. So my writing and all these ideas are at a website called davidshenk.com. You could learn about all my books. That's DavidShenk.com. And I also, if you go on Spotify or any of the music stuff, music sources online, music is now a huge part of my life. I'm a singer songwriter, and you could look for my band, which is called My Friend Frank. So we haven't talked about music, but I apply all of my ideas to my music now, and hopefully people will see some connections there.
Yeah, absolutely. David, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Jackson. It's been really fun.
Yeah.
I love your questions.